officer that there's a problem, something just popped up on the system. The point that I'm telling you is that what the persons that they're using to carry out these missives are persons very low, junior ranks. Before I left last night, before I left on Tuesday night, I called the junior ranks and said, oh, here's what's going to happen. They're going to blame you. Take precautions. And exactly that is what they did. Right? They set out some SOPs and some person refused and so made a mistake and those things like that. It is deliberate. So I want to thank each and every one of you here at home in Guyana. You know, I mean, I got calls. I mean, I want to thank the independent media in Guyana. I mean, by the time I got home, they were at my house and they did a sit-down interview without the pressure. Folks, don't be deceived. Don't be thinking that this is a regime that you can sit down and reason with. Don't be thinking that, you know, mean that you are we are, because there is a, for you know, you will probably get it. There is a modus operandi of person in the diaspora around where who's saying that, oh, we're too soft, their hands. We should be the ones that are holding out the olive branch in the name of democracy and moving forward. But you can't sit at a table with nobody who doesn't respect you. You can't sit at a table and tell somebody who goes out of their way to subjugate you and to keep you under. If they would like to meet us and speak, they come as equals. No other way. And without support from people like you, ladies and gentlemen, and those listening, that can't happen. So stay strong. Thank you very much.
Thanks, David, and thanks for the support. And I want to reiterate that the government does not have respect for the opposition, and they don't have respect for the Black population. And it is shameful, and I'm going to call names, that Onish Waldron, I mean, my family, you Todd, my friend, Juan Jill, Pelori Joe Hamilton, who I work with at Congress Place. I'm not even calling the criminal name. The minister of whatever you call it in the office of the prime minister. That is not a person. But all of these people sit down in the government, and the Afro-Guyanese community is supposed to be their constituency, and said nothing. Mark who? I'm not even calling his name. Well, he's the prime minister, Mark Phillips. These are Afro-Guyanese who see our people being discriminated against. And rather than stand up, rather than act like we are their constituents, well, Afro-Guyanese in the country are their constituents, they strip themselves of their Black identity and stay quiet because they know if they talk up, they'll be kicked out of the party by the tin cup dictator. And I know he has a press conference at 2 o'clock today. And I know that press conference is to curse me out. But I want to send a message to him today. I am coming after you too, toe-to-toe. And when we go to Capitol Hill, one of the things we will ask for is for Barrett Jagdale to be sanctioned under U.S. law. Why you all quiet? One of the objectives of this conference is for the illegal vice president of Guyana. As far as I'm concerned, he is ineligible to be vice president. Where's senior counsel? How come you all haven't challenged this man's appointment? The Constitution is very clear. If you're not eligible to be president, you can't be prime minister. They observe that. You notice whenever the prime minister and the president is out of the country, the vice president don't act as president. One of the ministers act as president. That's an acknowledgement that they know that he cannot be president or vice president. So if the Constitution says that someone who is ineligible to be president is ineligible to be prime minister, the doctrine follows that if you're ineligible to be prime minister, you're ineligible to be vice president. but he's appointed himself vice president. So we want to make sure that we register to Congress that he should be sanctioned under U.S. law. The Congress just sanctioned the former vice president of Panama, who did less wrong than Bar Jagdeo. And I spoke a lot about that yesterday, so I'm not going to go into it. But I just wanted to start off today with some fire, because I know at 2 o'clock he's going to be firing at me. I fire him first. A man who committed crimes against humanity. A man who should be tried in The Hague. And let me say, tried if convicted, he should get the death penalty. The death penalty. They murdered over 1,400 young black men and boasting about it. All right? So we want to start off this morning with, and I'll ask them to come and take their seats as I introduce the moderator. Mr. David Patterson, Member of Parliament for the AFC, APN UFC Coalition, as well as Dr. Vincent Adams, who is in a familiar town. You know, he was the Assistant Secretary of the Department of Energy of the United States of America under President Obama. And he retired and went home to become the head of the EPA in Guyana. And when the Jacobats came in, they fired him. They have nobody of his qualification to run the place, you know. But because he's a black man, they fired him. And like I said, Guyana, we don't observe your culture. You guys don't talk about race. We in America, we talk about race. Hey, we talk about race right here. We have laws to protect people that look like us, me, from discrimination in this country. And I'm thinking we may soon need laws in Guyana for the same thing. We're not a minority in Guyana, but we have to protect ourselves. So let me introduce the moderator for today. Her name is Melanie Headley. She's an attorney at law. She's a board member of CGID, and she's from Victoria. Victoria in the house. Melanie. Sure.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. And how was yesterday for you folks? It was good. I know that we had a lot of robust discussions, whether it was in the formal conference or in smaller groups. I know last night when we went out to the social, I know that some folks were even still conferencing over drinks. So Guyana is on everyone's mind, and CGID certainly is empowered to continue to act on Guyana's behalf, and seeing the energy in this room, right? No energy, no mobilization for Guyana. I mean, over the last 2 days, that's all we've been talking about, right? We're mobilized to help Guyana. Say it again? Oh, okay. Our hecklers, but all right. So before we begin with our panelists, I'm just going to ask us all to stand as the national anthem is being played. Oh, I see. That's what it is. That's why I do have a twin. Thank you so much. And as a salute again, we're gonna continue. We're gonna continue our discussions. I know that we addressed a lot about the oil and gas industry, and today's discussion on ethnic domination of the oil and gas sector and conspiracy with Exxon to flout the law. We're gonna continue our discussion and address those issues right now with our presenters, Dr. Vincent Adams. And of course, we welcome Mr. David Patterson, Member of Parliament. Come on, he deserves as many rounds of applause as possible. All right. Yeah. Somebody said Guyana is not a real place because they didn't allow they didn't allow the Member of Parliament for they put him on the no-fly list for a really, really, really ridiculous reason. But I just like to remind the presenters that each of you has 4 minutes for your presentation, and after which we'll have a discussion on the issues. And like we said, we have a schedule of going over to the Capitol at 1 o'clock today. So we want to ensure that we have as much of a discussion as possible. So I just ask us all to respect the time limits. And I know that you all see that they started setting up for lunch, so we're just gonna push through during lunch. So while the discussions are happening, just try not to talk with food in your mouth. But while the discussions are happening, we're gonna have lunch in a short while. Okay. So I am going to ask us to start with Dr. Vincent Adams. 4 minutes.
Thank you and good morning. Is it morning or time went by? You know, I did the executive thing and I asked myself, why are we here? And I know for sure, you know, and I'm trying to answer the question, we would not have been here had we have one people as being proclaimed by the government. We would not have been here without oil. We are now the new big kids on the block, and we're catching the attention of the entire world. Had we not have any oil, nobody would have been paying attention to us. You know, because of the machinations of this government, what has happened here is that the oil is now it's like a lubricant to a serious earthquake. And earthquakes don't happen suddenly. It grinds away, and earthquakes occurs when you've got just two massive plates of just massive rocks that is below the earth, way below the earth, and it's grind. There's a fracture, and it moves very slowly. And you could call those, the situation that we have here now, race and class. And it moves very slowly, it's gradual, you don't detect it. However, when it erupts, it will be heard in Washington. We're hearing the tremors right now. We're feeling the tremors. That is why we're here, so that we can try to quell those tremors so we don't get into the case of an earthquake. I was never a good history student, but I can recall vividly when I was just a 12-year-old, the era from 1962 to 1964. I remember distinctly, but I don't know how many people were here, but there was something called, it was triggered by the Calder budget. And it's no coincidence, or history might be repeating itself. So for those of us who tend to forget history, we are condemned to be repeating it. It was the Calder budget that it was an anti-working class budget. That's what it was dubbed at. That drove people into the street. And believe it or not, it was from the civil servants who were shortchanged in that budget. Now it's even gotten worse, because now it's expanded to even the Indian working class in the sugar industry. But I want to get, there was just an introduction here. Let me go to the topic at hand. Okay, oil. Working in the U.S. government, at least I had the opportunity to see what a democracy really is. And the pillars of a democracy are, one, to follow the rule of law, and two, to have strong institutions. And those are the things that have collapsed since this new government has taken over. And I'm going to go through just a few things that I'm sure you're well aware of. Up to recently, we had the scandal with the 14 billion going to the 3 billion, the 214 million going to the 3. We've got mistreatment, believe it or not, mistreatment of Guyanese on the FPSOs, meaning the ships. Guyanese are eating leftovers from the, and this here it's not coming from me. This is GAU's complaints, and as we know, GAU is a PPP union. Workers, they've got to eat leftovers. Their salaries or their wages are much lower than foreign workers. So those, we've got insurance. Well, not insurance, but total liability coverage. I'm sure that most of you are familiar with that. Where if we have a spill, there's no coverage right now for that, to clean up that spill, which could bankrupt not only Guyana but the entire Caribbean. So if you want a geopolitical issue, that's what's going to cause. Even Venezuela, it will wash the entire coast of Venezuela. So those are the kinds of things. Dumping of water, instead of re-injecting the water back into the reservoir, they're dumping it into the ocean. And they themselves are admitting it's killing out all the fish and the shrimp and the eggs for the fish. It's damaging to the economy in terms of the farmers. It will wash away the entire economy of the Caribbean. So those are the kinds of things, and I can go on and on because there are several. But the point is, this government is allowing them to do that. When the previous government were in place, we had all of those guardrails that I just went over there. There were supposed to be no flaring in the atmosphere. But Exxon, which is a surrogate, by the way, of the United States of America, and everything they do, it's going to be a reflection of the values of American. Those are the kinds of things we need to let the legislators understand. That Exxon they know what is the right thing to do. They know what are these standards. However, they're out there doing these type of things. and the government is really allowing them to do it, and they're breaking the laws, and they're not following the rule of law, and our institutions are completely destroyed since the coming of this government. So I'm going to hopefully get some questions and where I can expand some more as we continue.
Honorable David Patterson, thank you so much, sir, for your presentation. And we'll have some time for questions for the presenters after the second presenter. Mr. Patterson.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me. Thank you for bailing me out. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And then it's always a pleasure to share a stage with Vince, who I'll take 20 seconds to say how he told me he was a national cricketer. I have checked every volume of Google, and I haven't found a single representation. But we'll speak about that later. I love Londoners. Huh? They support each other in tin and tick. Ladies and gentlemen, Guyana has been blessed with the discovery of oil offshore in 2015. Everyone, home and abroad, should be extremely grateful for this new revenue stream, because it came at a time when our traditional revenue earning industries, namely gold, sugar, bauxite, timber, were either in complete decline, as sugar, after years of mismanagement, or were being affected by the global market challenges. There's this gold, the price of gold fluctuates. So we're all happy to have oil here. I mean, and let's get the elephant out of the room. There's been an ongoing public debate that has been dominated by both sides. I mean, by private sector, about the quality of the contract with Exxon and its partners, and the benefits derived from the petroleum sharing agreement, the PSA, was signed in 2016. These claims and conditions of they claim that they're very generous to Exxon. And we do say that at some stage a final resolution will come. But what we are concerned with, what I am concerned with, is what is being done with the revenues that we have right now. And that is where I would like to quickly address you on. Good or bad, we are generating at approximately, in 2020, 2021, we derived, I think, $1 billion, 1.4 in 2022. And we're probably on target to probably close to 1.8 billion US dollars, which will go to our national resource fund. This fund has clear guidelines. We can talk about the competition, but it has clear guidelines on the receipt. So therefore, every time the money comes in, the minister and the government makes lots of boo-boo of the money that came in. But so we know how the money is paid, because this money is paid directly by the operators, and it's paid directly to the bank, I think in the Bank of America. What is opaque is this expenditure of these funds when withdrawn. All attempts by the parliamentary opposition to amend our laws to ensure that there's a bit more transparency, accountability by legislation has been voted down by the government, all by a one-seat majority. This is just about 5,000 votes. So 5,000 votes, more than the combined opposition, they have determined how to use and how to spend this revenue stream. More than 50 proposals, or 50 or more proposals, we have put in on the petroleum activities bill, the local content bill, and they have voted them all down. So therefore, whenever anybody is telling you about inclusionary and discussions and those things like that, please remember that. Knowing time is going and we can elaborate, I just want to say this here. So, with the revenues there, we have poor institutions which are currently incapable of managing the oil revenue. Our human resource capacities are deficient. With all the money we're getting, there was recently an IDB report which says that 50% of our population is skipping a meal and living below the poverty line. Public servant wages have not increased in line with cost of living. Inflation is at an all-time low. There's no monetary or fiscal measures to buffer this rise. Yes, that rising cost of living. In other words, what we do have, we have a lot of money. We are getting lots of money. We are squandering it. What the government is doing is saying it out that they're doing infrastructure. The IDB, and I say this in closing to tell you this, so we can go into it. The IDB about 10 years ago made a statement that the easiest way to have a corrupt practice and to siphon off money is through infrastructure projects. Easiest way, and they calculated it at that time as 16%. They did a study I think in Africa, but I think in Guyana we've bettered it. The PPP has perfected it. They are in the 30%. So that is what they're doing. So my discussion today I would like to have a discussion on how we can actually work together to ensure that the revenues derived from oil and gas is shared equitably among everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Patterson, MP. We're just going to add one individual who is going to address us. He is Mr. Alson Lowe. He's the economic advisor to the opposition leader. So, Mr. Lowe, just come and make your remarks. And the same time limits apply. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak here today. Obviously, I'm speaking on short notice, so we'll see how I do. But essentially, we really have in Guyana, and I think that you see this play out when it comes to discrimination and injustice across the country, a system that does not promote transparency and accountability, and that allows for abuses which result in the injustices that we've seen and we've spoken about at length. Sadly, that culture of lack of accountability, culture of corruption, culture of domination and discrimination has played out in the oil industry over the past few years in many ways and across many issues. Currently, of course, there's the question, as Ms. Adams raised, of the first oil audits and the potential hundreds of millions of dollars that were going to go missing. But that is just the latest in a long string of really a lack of transparent governance that we've noticed in that oil industry. And over the course of the last year or so, we in the opposition have really had to prevent multiple crises in the oil industry by raising issues and by ensuring that the government is held accountable. Some of you may recall that the opposition was amongst the first people to raise the issue of Guyana's oil audits and of the potentially tens of billions of US that we would lose over the life of the oil industry if the PPP is allowed to get up to the mischief that they are accustomed to getting up to. And in fact, we even said it should be a criminal offense to hide these audits. Lo and behold, well, look at what was being hidden. Folks, that is no small amount of money. And we're just talking about audits here. Tens of billions of US would be enough to move Guyana's development forward massively, much less the hundreds of billions that the oil industry will bring in over the course of its life. What we have to, as Guyanese and across the spectrum, but also Guyanese who are not being treated fairly, have to get a sense of is we are in a position where Guyana will with good governance, be one of the best places in the world to live in. We cannot allow a government to mismanage this opportunity to the point that there is no sign that poverty is going to be eradicated at all. In fact, the government doesn't even talk about poverty, doesn't talk about inequality, hides these sorts of issues. Right now, there is industrial action by public servants, by teachers, right now, because they've not received salary increases. Folks, I saw also an article in the paper today talking about the healthcare system being on the verge of collapse because doctors and nurses are not being adequately compensated. Folks, according to the IMF, Guyana has a higher GDP per capita than the United Kingdom. This is so absurd. These people are so ridiculous that we cannot allow this to continue. How can you have a country with 50%, or UNICEF as well has pointed to high numbers of poverty, high poverty numbers? How can you have that when your income per capita is higher than the United Kingdom, higher than the European Union average? It is ridiculous. But I tell you what, they very well intend to keep it like this. Folks, the people-centered vision that the leading opposition has championed is not just a vision that is looking to give away money, but rather a structured approach to eradicating poverty for all Guyanese, including those groups who have historically been discriminated against. I would say also that it would be remiss of me, as of course MP Patterson spoke about the way that we use these resources. You know, I myself looked at the procurement over a prolonged period, and the percentages, first of all, Afro-Guyanese are disproportionately not awarded procurement contracts. But Amerindian Guyanese, in fact, you know, there's almost no procurement that they receive. Now, when we talk about these hundreds of billions of dollars, when we talk about these huge revenues, over time, many, you know, a significant portion of this will filter through our procurement system. Do you mean to tell me that hundreds of billions of years will be spent and Afro-Guyanese will not receive a just share of those procurement contracts, and Amerindian Guyanese will receive almost none? In fact, statistics show that poverty is greatest in the Amerindian community, especially in rural areas. And so I say all this to say that the government is serious about allowing poverty to remain in Guyana. It's taking no efforts to deal with it. And we must raise these issues and address them. And so, folks, on the one hand, we have a rosy potential future. We have revenues available. But on the other hand, we have a government that is creating a situation of desperation in a country of plenty. And on that note, I thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Adams, Mr. Patterson, and Mr. Lowe. We will take questions, and I am going to start off the questioning. Now,
Sorry, just some housekeeping for capital security. How many people here would be going on the tour? Sorry. Okay, so remember, they have a limited capacity. Only some of us will be able to go into the meeting, but the others, they want to take on a tour of the Senate and the House. So we would like everybody to go. So those who are not going to go, just raise your hands. 2. All right, 3, 4. All right, so somebody give me the numbers, please, of, can somebody from CGID get the numbers and the names of everybody? Yeah. Thanks.
all right. Helen, do you want to get the list started? Okay, yes. All right, thank you. Thank you so much to our presenters. Like I said, we will take questions. I'm gonna start off the questioning because I know that we talked a lot about this newfound wealth that we have. And it can be very lucrative for the Guyanese population. Of course, you know, in our presentations, we are talking about inequitable distribution of the resources so far. So I have to say, I visited Aruba recently, and even though like some folks call it like the Dutch disease or whatever it is, I hardly saw evidence of poverty. right? I asked about it, and the local gentleman who was driving me around, he said, well, everybody received a fair opportunity to get grants or loans in order to build properties. So almost everyone is a homeowner, as based on what he said. I don't know how true it is, but that's what I was told. But like I said, I hardly saw any shacks or whatever it is. So in terms of Guyana, I read an article about, by Mr. Nigel Hines some time ago where he talked about reaching across the table and the opposition forming some kind of relationship with the leading party to try to figure out how to remedy the issues that we're talking about now. So that's my question for I guess it's mostly directed to you, sir. And you know, just to give us a little bit of an idea of how you can foster the kind of relationship to address the issues that we're talking about, because it's not just about what we say or what we know the problems are or the problems that we're angry about. We want to know exactly what your plans are to implement some of the suggestions that we're doing here today. So that's the first question, and someone's going to come around the mic after Mr. Patterson or the other panelists address that.
Is this working?
No, you can stay here. I think it's working. It's working.
Yeah. Very, very good question. And I want to start off by saying that we, at least I really do share your idea that everybody should benefit. I'm sure that could benefit. I'm start off looking at the natural resource fund, right? It's supposed to have been that our starting point. And our natural resource fund, sovereign wealth fund is what you may know of it, where all the money goes in, and you have clear guidelines for how it's spent and on what it can be spent, but also the oversight body would be comprised of representatives of every single region, ethnicity. In some cases, how the proposal we have made been a bit big, but it's largely more right, better. So that was scrapped. Some of us here, I think, are actually were trying to stop the government from scrapping a oversight body which included every single body, every single region, and every single community. It's a 5-man community. That's what we have now. So it takes two hands to scratch. I mean, they about, I don't know, 2 months ago, the petroleum activities bill, we put in 31 amendments. And these 31 amendments, folks, that they are not amendments to strengthen the hand of the opposition or to diminish the hand of the government. We just bring open transparency to the process. And I give you an example. In the law that they passed, you can award an oil block. Oil block is what Exxon has. You can award an oil block by 2 ways. One, by open tender, whereby you publish it in the paper, like what they just recently completed, and then people bid for it open transparently. The second is by direct negotiation. Now we know direct negotiation. We've already seen it. They've given away blocks, the country block to a company in Canada, I think it was. Right. The Canada company was that has absolutely no relationship to oil. The only oil they may have even known about was the car engine oil, but they got a whole block. So we said, and they claimed that there may be geopolitical reasons why the government should be able to negotiate. We said no problem. Here is what's open and transparent and decent government do. After your negotiations, come to Parliament and tell the people of the country in Parliament what you've done and why you've awarded this contract to the people before you sign it. They rejected it. We can go through. I don't want to spend it. So it takes two to tango. I mean, we have and the local content law. We put in 14 amendments to strengthen. So the oil is Guyanese oil. I mean, diaspora, native Guyanese, I mean, first and second generation Guyanese, and we have struggled so long with the time we thought that we all benefit from it. We put in 14 amendments, 14, to ask them to strengthen it to ensure that again, this is nothing to do with the opposition, nor to do with um, the Guyanese can benefit. They rejected all. So it's not that we don't try, you know what I mean? We have asked. Oh yes, my colleagues are here telling me the budget proposals. We have asked. I mean, they don't amend a single penny. I mean, I know right now, though, in America, you have a, a, a crisis. You're trying to agree a balance of budget, and both sides have a say. And if both sides don't come to a compromise, both the Republicans and Democrats wouldn't pass. Doesn't work. So 5,000 more votes, and that's it. Winner take all. So I mean, so it is a good thing. I mean, we can't not stop trying, but we're just telling you, being realistic of the people that we deal with. They do anything, you know what I mean? Talk about distribution. There are two shore bases, right? One started on the 2015 when it was thing. The second one is comprises a consortium of business persons. Bloomberg, you all know Bloomberg, interviewed one of the owners consortium. It says, and of course, there's no none. What should I say? It's entirely made up of East Indian Dubai. So Bloomberg came to one of the owners of the consortium and said, "Well, why is it you're having a consortium of business persons? Why haven't you at least tried and make their consortium look like one Guyana?" And he says to Bloomberg, "There's not a single black Guyanese businessman that can even afford the feasibility study of business in Guyana. He said they can't even afford the feasibility study to build a shore base, much less contribute to a shore base." And he's very, very close to the president. Huh? Yes, he said he tried to find a single black business who he could do as a partner. So this is what we're dealing with here, you know. And he's a very, very close friend to the president.
This is the same consortium.
Yeah, the same consortium that the people are under investigation now. The same gentleman that made that statement, same gentleman, his family is on interview. But that's what we're dealing with now. So Bloomberg, it struck a chord. Wow. You have a country that whatever percentage you want to ascribe to how many blacks, Indians, and those things like that. But it can't be more than 6 or 7% differential. Yet, a businessman in the 21st century, in 2022, can say that there's not a single black business, and it does not strike a chord with the government. I don't want to, I'm a politician, I could talk more. This is very close to me, very, very close to me, because I would like to even get an opportunity to speak on, let us talk about infrastructure projects. January 1, moderator, give me 1 minute more, but I want persons to understand what we're dealing with here. On January 1, 2021, you had companies that were scrap metal dealers. You had companies that were spare parts dealers. You had companies that racing car drivers. You had companies that, this is January 1, 2021, I'm talking about 2 years ago. You had companies that their primary business was pageant promoters, fashion shows. By December 31st, 2021, and then just the scrap metal dealers. We don't just scrap iron, you know. I mean, because America want broke into crude, crazy. I want to lose my audience here. Scrap metal dealer had over 20 million US dollars worth of contract instructed. All his only qualification is that he used to pick up iron. The race car driver around in a race car had about the same. The spare parts, and not even one, is two spare parts. One, he was famous, he had spare parts, and he sell used cars. He building 2 schools, 3 schools in Guyana right now. They got a fellow that same thing. I had trucks and so building. The fashion show holder, he got building a school and those things like that. And they all got it, right, by tinkering with the procurement regulations. So when you raise this here and they bring the proof and so forth, they went through the national procurement of things. So what they did is dilute the procurement regulations for their friends and favorites. So the race car driver and the scrapper metal man, you know, I mean, when the traditional black contractors bid, they say you have to have 7 years of 3 years of similar experience and this financial, this and this and this. When they give these guys it, you know, I mean, the building roads, say, oh, all you need is financial capacity. You don't need experience. And then the barrel jack, they could get a concept of that. Same thing, exact same thing with what the guy that built the shore base. We're a shortage of contractors, and we give the people that had the money and the capabilities that we thought to do it. That, ladies and gentlemen, right? I saw something about somebody said that they want give you facts in it. That is a life show, indisputable. Like a word like the uncontestable facts. And that is what challenges we're facing. So we can be decent, we can put on and be the Christians that we all were taught to be and we all continue to practice, and we can turn the other cheek. We can sit down and hope that at some point in time, someone will come to save us. But no. We have to. And that's why I'm so glad to be this conference. That's why I went through everything to come here. Just to say this to y'all, you know what I mean? Right? And if we don't get up and get cat, eat we dinner.
Correct.
Thank you.
Let me add the most. I just wanted to highlight something David said. First of all, Bar Jagdev, the vice president, acknowledged 2 weeks ago at one of his famous press conferences that there's no black person with an oil block. Black company, black-owned company, nothing. He was forced to acknowledge that. He's now pushing a group of women to own oil blocks. They have, anyway, I'm not sure how that's going to become a reality. Second, Jack Dare also said in that same press conference, which was stunning to me, and I'm wondering why the country is so silent. He said, why should we allow, we, the cabal, why should we allow the Parliament of Guyana to play a role in the management of the oil and gas industry? Y'all heard it? Yeah. He said it on video at the press conference. I thought the Parliament was the highest decision-making forum of the country. That passes laws to regulate and manage the oil and gas industry. He said, why was we, them who the father dead or left the country for, allow the Parliament to play a role in the management of oil? And this is the context in which he's answered that. He said that. It was because a journalist asked him, why are they voting down all of the proposals from the opposition? Why we must give them, the opposition in Parliament, and the Parliament a role in the management of the oil. His exact words. The other thing I want to mention is, in terms of discrimination, and David was trying to be nice. He's a diplomat, I'm not. The company that's leading this consortium is under investigation by the FBI and would most likely be sanctioned by the US Treasury. The second thing I want to mention at this forum in Washington is that I did some research and found that Exxon is funding some political activities of the government. And the CEO of Exxon must answer that question. Under the same rubric that they're funding these activities, that same organization held a protest against the opposition leader increase. And my question to the Exxon management, did you fund that protest too against the opposition? You must answer that question. The last thing I want to mention is, it's not connected to oil and gas, but it's connected. When the coalition government was in power, and David was the former minister of public infrastructure, they awarded a plot of land in Ogle to a Guyanese American businessman to build, who has the franchise for the Hilton Hotel, to build that hotel. When this PPP government came to power, they took away the land. They went after every large black business in Guyana to try to take away their land. Sivan's Car Care, right? Everybody knows that. Here the rationale that they used to take away the land. The land was legally acquired after the no confidence motion. When they themselves went to the CCJ, all the courts, to get the courts to nullify any action subsequent to the no confidence motion, and the courts threw it out. So if the CCJ ruled that the actions of the government were lawful after the no confidence motion, how could the acquisition of the land be unlawful? Right? So they took it away. After public pressure, they gave them a smaller quantity of land, way, way smaller, like 3 acres, as opposed to like 11 acres or something, at $1 million. The investors spent millions of dollars to develop the land, while the developer was acquiring funding and also the guarantee of US Exim Bank. Right? They took away the land again. They said he's taken too long to put the hotel up. They just came to power 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Took away the man land, give him back another land, and within a year, they expect him to throw up the Hilton. And now they took away back the land. And this is something that we're going to raise the Capitol Hill and raise hell for. These people think they own the country. And those of us who live here in the diaspora, and one of the things they did is they try to block US Exim Bank from coming to this conference. And I'm raising these issues because those of us who live in the diaspora here, just like I raised with the State Department yesterday, one of the things that we will do is really ask for an accountability from the State Department and the others, why they can respond to a despotic regime who's paying lobbyists to tell them lies, and they're not responding to the American people. And the Biden-Harris administration will have to explain to us in the swing states why they are responding to a government who actively campaigned against President Biden. The PPP government actively interfered in the politics, campaigned against President Biden, told their supporters to vote for Trump. And now we have bureaucrats in the State Department who are backing them, in bed with them. You have a US ambassador who went to the home of a man who was under investigation by the FBI, the Justice Department, for funding terrorism, namely Hezbollah, for, money laundering, drug trafficking, and the US ambassador went to his home for lunch and said it was a bathroom break. Gold smuggling. And I'm not, these are allegations, right? But I don't understand how a US ambassador could go to the house of somebody who's on the no-fly list for terrorism and still be an ambassador. This is the same ambassador who was telling the courts how to rule for the elections. And the leader of the Democratic Party in Congress called for her to resign, and the Biden administration didn't respond. So all of these things we'll raise when we go to Congress. And as far as I'm concerned, the disrespect that the PUP government is showing to half of the population, the State Department is joining them in doing it. I said yesterday, the Assistant Secretary of State blatantly lied. Blatantly lied. He told an audience at the Inter-American Dialogue that Irfan Ali is so incredible that he won every single district in the country in the last elections. This is what the assistant said. It's embarrassing to the United States for an assistant secretary of state to be repeating that sort of nonsense when they lost every major town in the country. So I'm not sure if that the State Department is now consuming propaganda from lobbyists, or they're getting reports from the embassy on the ground. You got to figure out how this works. So I wanted to raise these issues because of the hundreds of thousands of people who will be watching this conference, and to give the assurance of the people on the ground in Guyana, the people on the ground in Guyana, that we're representing them here. And we're going to raise hell in this country. We're going to rock the boat, and if it sinks, it sinks. But we're not going to sit back and allow this nonsense to happen. Thanks.
Could I just add, just quickly? I mean, this is how things are so ridiculous and in the decision making of this government. I think it was 2 years ago. Well, I guess folks are familiar that every year there's a big international conference, oil and gas conference. I think it was either last year or the year before. Kathy, you remind me. When I think it was the year before the last, they did not invite a single person from the opposition to be on any panel. And would you believe what they said in public when the question was asked, that there's no one qualified in the opposition to sit on those panels? The second thing is to add, let me add, David mentioned the going from the 22, which covered, I mentioned this yesterday, but this is important in terms of when you hear people say, well, the opposition is not cooperating and we're not shaking their hands and stuff like that. Remember the current opposition has the 22 that David spoke about that cover the entire broad spectrum of the population. Now it's down to 5. There was an agreement made between the two parties that the opposition will have 2 members among those 5. They refused to accept the opposition's nominations. So, it's not a case where the opposition is not cooperating. They're just rejecting and refusing to even the offer of reasonable participation.
All right, I just wanted to, is this on? I just wanted to add another note on this. One of the problems we've got in politics in Guyana is that things that should not be controversial are controversial. To my mind, the idea that we should be dealing with poverty in Guyana is not a controversial thing to say. It is difficult for us to work along with a government that doesn't see that as the sacred duty of those in power, alleviating poverty. And so what I think we have to do is to talk more about these types of things so that it is impossible for the government to avoid these critical issues. Now, of course, I can understand there will always be disputes as to how to go about specifically dealing with poverty. But there cannot be a dispute as to whether or not we should deal with poverty. So from that perspective, I think in order for us really to be able to work together as a government and opposition, there has to be some sort of an understanding by the government that their approach when it comes to ignoring critical issues in Guyana cannot continue. And it cannot continue to hide from some of the core problems that the country is facing. So to me, by raising and highlighting these issues, we can set a platform that will allow us to deal with the issues in one form or another.
Thank you so much. And in addition to setting up a platform to deal with the issues, and I think all of you touched on it, you also have to be aggressive and audacious, because that's how they became the ruling party in the first place, right? They were aggressive, they were audacious, and they probably did some unchristian things, Mr. Patterson. But I feel like you know, part of the goal of the conference is to empower you guys to empower all of us to act and act with aggression and audacity, just like they did. So so I see a couple of hands up, and you have the mic, sir. Go ahead, say your name and ask your question, please. Mhm. Oh. Oh, I see. Oh, we have two microphones. Mhm.
Maybe a general schooling profession. I didn't think I did it twice. Looking at this for string that for arteries. Many thought of the they do propose for that here propose. How do you guys see that highway working with the limited space we have, with the fact that we have open water treatment system and the way we get school of art? How do you propose that would happen if you wasn't got a government, when you get in government? Do you see it feasible to get forward that area?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Excellent questions and those excellent questions. And I'm glad that you noticed the third quality set the road. Look, Morgan, sorry, that thing is so. Nothing should happen in Guyana without a whole transportation infrastructure plan. Right? We had one. But typical and in Guyana, and it's not only a plan to show you where it's going, it's allowing the country persons like yourself to know what's going to happen and what's happening in the future. These guys have money and they don't know how to spend the money. So they come up with these half-baked ideas without any plans. And exactly what you're talking about, the East Bank embankment, that would be another flop. But of course, you will hear it cost $44 billion, right? And then obviously it'll take 4 years and we're gonna lose track of it, right? And all the money will disappear. And I can tell you that they just announced. They will just one day you'd wake up and you hear that how they're doing a transformation road from nowhere at all. It's not linked to anything, just like you're saying. And another issue which I feel dearly of, and I do hope a lot of people, the lack of investment in our capital city. Our capital city, Georgetown, used to be a garden city. It went down. We tried to bring it up, and we brought it back up on its knees and so forth. None of these fancy investments in these roads that you talk about, there's no plan whatsoever for Georgetown. Actually, Georgetown was better off between 2015 and 2020 when you had no oil than now. And there's only one reason, and folks that come in and say that they're enthralled and with what's happening in Guyana. And when they jump on, they see this, they see a jumbie bird, and you see a jaguar and those things like that. Take a look at the heart of Georgetown. Take a look at the traditional wars. I mean, they went to Boystown and move everybody upon Trent Dam and those things like that and build something there. And they flood the whole place. Because exactly what you say, Morgan. They didn't think about it. Call one of their friends, one of the scrap metal friends built it as well. Huh? That what was it? Where is it? Independence Boulevard, scrap. One of the same people I took, they built it. When the heart of Georgetown, won by the constituency, by the opposition since it was established. And they carry a man that was a scrap metal mill and a spare parts dealer 2 years ago. to build that. And what they did, they just put it in the middle, cut off the 2 areas, no drainage, and it's now a swimming pool. No plan. But they have no respect for you. No respect for us. Oh yes. I almost forgot. I almost forgot, folks. Sharon has a counterpart. For the most views, right? Sharon does In the Ring, and a fella does the Joker Show. And on top of this, and when he finished doing the Joker Show, he interviewed the VPs, but he also had one of the largest construction companies. Well, yeah, you know the company. So he has one of the largest. So in 2021 January, I use that as a hallmark. He was a joker and a TV clown. In 2023, multi-billionaire contractor. That's what we're dealing with, And they don't see the. And you know what? They give the pattern. And this is disrespectful that people have to. They give the pageant person, the people that have the whole pageant shows, a contract 400 million, 2 million US to build a school in Birmingham, part of the opposition stronghold, a primary school for our students to go and study. They didn't frighten Babu John and so forth because of the building collapsing and killed their children. In the heart of the opposition stronghold, they give the pageant holder a contract. So yes, Mr. Morgan, right? It is without a plan, without a overarching plan, it is just throwing good money over bad project.
So we're gonna have one more question.
One more question.
Just one.
No, hold on. Let's get Wally first, and then we come.
Yeah.
No. I have a reason why I'm here. You can come.
Yeah, and just so you know, there's a paper coming around. If you have not already done so, please ensure that your name is on the list for those who will be taking the tour of the Capitol. All right, so go ahead, please. Say your name and ask the question. Okay.
Right. Thank you very much. My name is Wally. Two things. First, there's a fascination on my part because I sit here in Nigeria, and I see this history that we seem to be sharing and the migration because Nigeria had oil since 1958, and we've been through this similar struggle whereby the oil majors in a certain segment, and then the people suffer. I'm sure that you've seen it several times in the news. There's an area in Nigeria called the Niger Delta, where the majority of the oil come from. And so we went through this. But now, in the last 2-3 years, because of all the lawsuits that have been filed against the oil majors, a lot of them have left the coastal areas or the land areas where there was oil and gone deep offshore. So now those oil blocks of the coastal areas of the land have been turned over to Nigerians to run. I'm wondering if there's a study of that history here to begin to form strategies in which to deal with this potential. Because first and foremost, oil is big business, especially deep offshore, like those are lockdowns. And so therefore, you need to the investment and the way to. So just owning a lot of I can't say to me, owning a lot of law is not because I think the law, you push the law to say that develop that money. Then you put the see some traction because those people will have gotten but in the second instance, I believe that if you begin to look at what Nigeria did with Shell, and they are suing on Shell now is almost selling all its assets because of the liability issues that we have to do how it's operating. I think it's even much easier for you to sue Exxon because Exxon as an American company has some certain laws that you have to follow. And those laws are applicable even in their international operations. So if you begin to approach it from that perspective, like minority contracts, you can demand to see what they're doing about minority contracts in their to say, hey, look, how much of that you are working and how is it? I think with those kind of things, I'm not sure. My question is, are those is that things to be able to on those pressures being put on the contractors who actually being considered? Right?
You want? I know Vince want to go first.
Yeah, this.
1 minute. 1 minute.
Oh no.
1 minute.
Well,
Start.
yes, and I touched on it. The problem is Exxon is not following the rule of law. I mean, I can give you a bunch of examples, but they're allowed to do that by the government. They were following the rule of law when the opposition was in office, without question. You know, I headed the EPA, and I know because some of those laws were passed or put into the permit or the regulation when I was there. It's all of that have been disbanded. I mentioned some of those with the flaring and even the EIA, the environmental impact assessment, which is the Bible of any project that has any environmental impact. They're not even doing EIAs anymore. And even the EIAs, here's one example that I must mention. For example, the EIA, that even their specialists, even Barjavio last week said that the EIA is basically, you have to follow the EIA. The EIA said that the safe operating limit, you mentioned operating, the safe operating limit of the forest project is supposed to be 120,000 barrels per day. When you put a safe operating, and that's in quote, when you put a safe operating limit or something in an EIA, it's because of you've done the study, the size of the pipe, what the pipe is made of, the pressure, or something is going to blow. Do you know what they're operating at? 155,000 barrels per day, which is dangerous. And the government is allowing them to do that. And on top of that, let's say you have a spill, the spill response plan is totally inadequate. When I was at EPA, we refused to sign that spill response plan. And then on the back end of it, when the opposition was in office, in the permit we wrote in that the parent company, because right now it's a subsidiary, EPGL, that has no assets to cover any spill. We said the parent company has to carry all liabilities over and beyond insurance. They're refusing to do that. As a matter of fact, they went to court, and the government sided with them to appeal the decision in the court. The judge went along with the opposition, when we were there, to say, yeah, this language is plain vanilla. It says the parent company has to cover everything over and above. Yep. The government appealed it with Exxon. So we are appealing our own laws. So that's the lawlessness that is going on with this current government. They're siding with them, and they're throwing all of the laws in the trash.
But you're right. Several cases have been brought from various things, on different aspects of the whole tax issue. Several cases have been brought. He's involved in too. But what the government has now done, right, is labeled to the PR company and probably to the measurement. Every person that has opposed how they handle oil and bring a case, they've labeled them as busybodies and started telling people that they're against development and those things like that. Started using their own media against them. Started using the columnists against the person opposition. Well, they do that against us all the time. But if you as a civil society person brings the thing, it's entire. You're almost targeted. So they've now been doing that to anyone that steps up to challenge them. But you're right. You have to. But I note, and I do hope we don't take from 150 from 1958. That's a lot of years there. 70 years. I hope we get it quick, right.
And
Let me just make another.
let me just, before I lose this thought, some of those lawsuits that you're talking about Shell in Nigeria, you remember I told you about the subsidiary, EPGL. One of the defense that Shell is using in the lawsuit is that EPGL is a subsidiary of them and they signed the documents and Shell is not liable, which is the same situation we have in Guyana where we were heading. EPGL, that's why they do not want to sign the parent company guarantee. The same case that is going on right now with Shell.
Yeah, so from that, you can see that clearly we're looking at the ongoing cases, but we would also show you that we've researched the histories of many countries' oil and gas experiences. I myself have researched probably 100 years of history in Venezuela, Trinidad. One of the reasons that we've been able to catch these guys early when the determined foolishness is because we're familiar with the types of problems that you have, and we've even been able to threaten court action and gotten these companies to back off. And so we will continue to build on that. But of course, as these cases evolve, we have to continue to learn from the experiences of other countries with these countries.
Thank you. We have one final question from the, go ahead. Do you have a microphone?
I'm here to listen not to speak about region 10, which is the largest constituency of, or one of the largest constituencies of Africa. Whatever the topic of oil revenue, have seen no capital work because the revenue which is the residents of the debt. So that is the fact that, I mean, as the previous minister of Public Works, to shine some light on some of the ideas we should have with the revenue for the debt, with the revenue for the debt, because right now, we have no
I could talk with Dave. You got to talk with people. I come late. I can talk with you.
It's all about bridge. Question. The question is asking is,
I got you. I didn't get your name though. Oh, yeah, Dominic. Well, Dominic, first and foremost, and you're right. But let me tell you this. That Linden Mabur Road, and I'm gonna toot my little horn here, right? Excuse me, modesty aside. Right? It's me set out that road has to be done. That's money from the British. Barrett Jagdeo himself said that when if he wins the election, he can stop that. And the British said no. If you pull the money, we're not gonna do that. The Wismar Bridge, that design is finished long before 2020. The bridge where it is, the Wismar, they even changed the location. We had a discussion with you, Linden, of saying, tell us we're gonna make Linden the gateway for South America. You may not know, Darren, that we set up, we put a transportation hub right in the middle, right over in that there. So therefore, because we anticipate when the road is completed, that all the transportation from Brazil will come through Linden. We made it a policy because we found that all the people just drive past Linden. The miners, all the gold miners come, they don't even stop and buy greens in Linden, not even gas. We made it a policy. We will put a transportation hub in Linden whereby no bus, just like they do in Brazil and other countries, no bus could pass Linden, right? So you go put a market at fuel depot and everything. They come from Brazil, they stop at Linden and you catch another bus. Like they do it in all other countries. So that makes sure that Lindeners get the benefit of everything that passes through Linden. That was already in place. But they would not tell you that. They would sit down and have you well, we started the road from Kokwani all the way to Oriala, so that you can carry your produce from there, from Region 10, the timbers and those things like that, to get to Oriala and all of that was there in place. We did the studies for to bridge Kokwani, the studies the bridge put and if you go back and I'm willing to sit with you, we set up, we put a new bridge at Sand Hill. so that the Londoners don't have to come and then squabble in Georgetown when they want to do everything. You have to come down to town because people from Region 10 can have their own routes, right? We had several plans that were all there, all funded, all in place, as you would know, but they scrapped them. Why? Because they want to break your spirits in Linden, you know. They want you to start thinking like how you maybe even you're thinking in the moment. What's in it? We ain't do nothing for them. You know what I mean? Don't think like that. All the plans we had there. So, and I tell you the last one, and I will call his name out too. Mr. Niger Hughes, who has a great affinity for Linden and Region 10, brought a team of persons. There was a big hurricane in Puerto Rico. I can't remember which it is. The devastated Puerto Rico. DHL hub for South America is located in Puerto Rico. They wanted to relocate their regional hub in Region 10. You're used that airport. That's there. So if you hear the people come and tell you how they're bringing cargo transshipment to Region 10 and how they call they love you, don't think it's Mr. Nigel and the APNU government bringing it. Because in the works. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much to our presenters. Mhm.
Sorry for the general thing. I come late. And I want to talk. But when I'm done, you coming back at 3?
Yes.
Yes,
So
I can talk more. So
we started
I
a
only
really
continue.
good tradition of like small group discussions, etc. So you all should definitely get together and have a chat more about that. So thank you so much to our presenters. I just want to ask all the MPs in the room to stand, all the members of parliament. So as we do the changeover, I just want you to stand, and I want everyone to know who you are, and give them a round of applause for all the work that they're doing. We want you to go back to Guyana knowing that you have power, you have personal power, you have power as a group to address all the things that we talk about here. The next two panelists, thank you so much.
A lot of people. So we have some guests, and some people only registered today. Some people don't know. Someone just asked me who's the opposition leader. So will the opposition leader come forward? Members of Parliament, and we'll get a shot. Photographer. So while they're coming, we have Mr. Ricky Ramsaru, Member of Parliament for AFC, AP, and UFC. The Shadow Attorney General, Royce A. Ford, Senior Counsel, Nima Flu-Bess, who's been in the forefront of the fight to save Black people's homes, who the government has bulldozed. Of course, David Patterson, who's now the star of Washington. We have the opposition leader here, Mr. Norton, with the gray suit, who's now joining us. Mr. Ronald Cox, Member of Parliament. Come down, Ricky. We have Mr. Ronald Cox. We have Dawn Hastings Williams. She's the General Secretary of the PNC. Kathy Hughes, who's the chairman of the AFC. Sherrod Duncan, where's Sherrod? Sherrod Duncan, who is the vice chairman, right? General Secretary of the AFC. And Amanza Walton, the Shadow Minister of Foreign Affairs, who's a member of Parliament for the AP and UFC. So Sherrod Duncan, Ricky Ramstroop, Royce Dave Ford, Nima Flu-Bess, Opposition Leader Aubrey Norton, Ronald Cox, Dawn Hastings, Kathy Hughes, David Patterson, and Amanza Walton Desir. Give them a round of applause. We also have another elected official here from Guyana, the Deputy Mayor of Linden. Come here. You asking all these questions about Linden, you should have the plan. He's a New Yorker, but he went home and ran for office, and he won Deputy Mayor of Linden. So he is, Dominique, come to the other side. So he's the Deputy Mayor of the second largest town in Guyana. Hold on, let me come in this photograph. Thank you. Yeah. Oh, okay. But we gotta catch it. All right. So I want to especially introduce two people. And the reason I asked these two people to come talk to us today is because one of them is from Jamaica. All right? You all hear me? One of them is from Jamaica, which means that we're establishing our link to the CARICOM, but our brothers and sisters in the CARICOM. And second, one is from Nigeria, and we are establishing our connections to Africa. So, Wale, come forward. Oh, no. We're not, sorry. We're getting to you after. So we will break at 1 and go to the capital and come back for 3, and then we'll be here from 3 to 6. So the panel now is not, it's not Wale, is Amanza. Oh, what? Yeah. She's already here. Yeah. And Dr. Rosalita Hamilton. Rosalia Hamilton, she is Professor Dr. Rosalia Hamilton, LLB, PhD, so she's a lawyer. She is the director of the Institute of Law and Economics, and she's a distinguished scholar at the P.J. Patterson Institute for Africa-Caribbean Advocacy. Moderator. Okay, well, we know the opposition leader is going to leave, but so we're doing an action plan, meaning a follow-up to this conference when we get back at 3. So we're asking people not to leave. All right, I know the opposition leader has to leave, but we're asking people from the diaspora not to leave. We go to the capital for 2 hours and come back.
Okay, and by the way, if you have not put your name on the list, please ensure that raise your hand right now if your name is not on the list of folks who are going to be touring the Capitol. So take note and please just bring the list over to them, okay? So we're going to allow Dr. Hamilton to begin and to come to the podium and to address you. Some of the same time constraints still apply, but you have 15 minutes to go through. Both of you actually have 15 minutes to go through your presentation, and then we're gonna have a discussion afterwards. Okay? All right. Thank you so much. No, not 15 minutes each. 15 minutes total.
Thank you all so much for inviting me here. It's indeed a pleasure to be here. I've been asked to talk about the power of advocacy in achieving good governance. And I really want to start by just laying this simple idea that for democracy to work, citizens cannot be passive observers, right? So we want to start there. We can't, this is not an observation game. We have to be active participants. And I think linked to that activism is a core idea that we are owners of our country. Yeah, we're not just tenants or squatters, right? In fact, I had the opportunity over the past 3 years in Jamaica a few years ago, and I spoke to over 2,000 Jamaicans. And I would say less than 1% in those forums felt that they own Jamaica. It belonged to somebody else. It's a key idea, and I see that as important if we're going to tackle this matter of advocacy, citizen advocacy. Now, it is an important component of governance. Citizen advocacy, I think, can be conceived as part of our civic responsibility, where citizens have a voice in having a say in the decisions that ultimately affect them directly. And so it is that activism, it is that voice that is important to shape accountability, influence decisions, and ultimately work towards the kind of society that we want. And so those ideas are good ideas. We know them, we're familiar with democracy and accountability and so on. But I want to spend a few minutes just reflecting on what it means to us in the Caribbean. What does good governance mean to us and this idea of being active? So we have to move away from this idea that we're tenants or squatters in our country. And where did this come from? Our history. We have this shared history. We may have some differences today, but we have a shared history. And that history of colonial domination is a history that made us all feel like tenants and squatters in our own land. It belongs to somebody else, and the responsibility of governance is in the hands of somebody else. So I think once we have that mind shift, we begin to go down this road of advocacy. You know, 86 years ago, in 1937, Marcus Garvey made this point. We must emancipate ourselves from mental slavery. Amen. 86 years today, we're still grappling with what does that mean? What does it mean to emancipate ourselves? I think it's linked to this self-confidence that's required to tackle these problems. We have to really believe that we have the answers and we don't have to rely on someone else. In fact, in his own words, he said, if you have no confidence in yourself, you're twice defeated in the race of life. Wow. Those were Marcus Garvey's words. And as I stand here in Washington, I was struck by the words of John Lewis, because in his own experience of fighting that good fight, he understood that this struggle to shape a society that is democratic, that is fair, that is just, is not a struggle for a day, a week, a month, or a year. It's a struggle of a lifetime. This is not a quick fix. And he says, never, ever be afraid to make some noise, to get into good trouble. And he talked about necessary trouble. And that necessary trouble, I suggest, is what is required to build inclusive democracy. Agreed. Now, the second point I want to make is this idea of what is this responsibility of ownership for a country. You know, the concepts of good government are quite opaque. What does it actually mean in terms of our life, in terms of our history and the kind of society we need to shape, especially now as we struggle, all our countries, with the kinds of economic outcomes that could lift this living standards. I was struck by the comment, and I did look at your GDP per capita, and you are, in fact, above or just around world average on paper. But 50% of poverty rate, that's amazing. So those numbers don't quite tell the story. And so we need a framework in which all our voices can be heard. And so what I suggest we do in wrapping up is this. We need to reflect on our history of authoritarianism. We have, all of our countries have inherited that. Again, part of our legacy. It permeates every aspect of our society. Yeah. And that includes governance.